Now, the charity Save the Children is warning that 3.7 million Filipinos are being affected by a drought brought about by record-setting temperatures. Now, the capital, Manila, beat its previous heat record last week with temperatures above 38.8 degrees Celsius or 100 degrees Fahrenheit. The country's president, Bongbong Marcos, said that the high demands for cooling systems was putting pressure on the national electricity grid as well, and crops belonging to farmers in the Philippines are becoming unusable, and rice yields are plummeting, putting families at risk of financial ruin. Well, for more, I spoke to Faiza Ali. She is the humanitarian manager at Save the Children Philippines. Faiza, thank you very much for taking the time to be with us. We understand that there in the Philippines, over 3 million people have been affected by this drought so far. What's life become like for them?
The worsening drought and dry conditions in most parts of the country, specifically in the Western Samar and the Visayas region of the country, is significantly affecting the education and welfare of children in farming households. Right now, the worries of farming families in Western Samar are evident. According to the Department of Social Welfare and Development report, more than 900 families in about 5,000 barangays or villages across 14 regions are facing agricultural losses and water shortages. And this crisis is impacting around 3.7 million Filipinos, including children.
Faiza, something I just wanted to pick you up on. You said an impact on education. Tell us more about that. Does this mean, for example, that children are not able to go to school?
Right now, this protracted drought across the country has impacted children. Most of these children, especially those coming from households relying on agriculture, were forced to temporarily stop going from school so that they can help their families to find additional income or work or alternative livelihoods because of the lack of harvest from their farmlands.
And so for those farmers, you know, the fact that we're seeing, in some cases, flooding, in some cases, drought becoming all the more prevalent there in the Philippines, what are they considering? Are they talking about potentially having to leave their farms, leave their homes?
The farmers that we're able to talk with during our assessment, they are still looking for climate resilient livelihoods or options. They can still continue their livelihood activities. And meanwhile, the government is helping them as well as actors like Save the Children Philippines to look for a more alternative, climate resilient livelihood options.
I just want to focus the fact that you were mentioning there some of the issues for children here. Of course, these weather events are being exacerbated by climate change. Across the region there in Asia, what is the sense about what's needed to secure the future for children when essentially they are facing some of the consequences of climate change created by adults?
Well, right now, we are still advocating and investing in climate resilience adaptations. Investing on climate resilience and adaptation measures is essential to minimize the impact of climate change on vulnerable communities, especially on children, including the ecosystems and also the infrastructure. This includes measures like building resilient infrastructure, improving early warning systems, and implementing policies to protect vulnerable populations, including the children.
Faiza Ali from Save the Children in the Philippines. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you so much.
Well, there are renewed concerns about the fate of our ocean's coral reefs amid warming sea temperatures. Last summer, a mass bleaching event fueled by climate change severely damaged reefs right around the world, including in the US state of Florida. That's where sea temperatures soared as high as 100 degrees Fahrenheit or 38 degrees Celsius. Now, restoration groups are growing more heat-resistant corals to help repair the damage. A North America climate specialist, Carl Nassman, has been speaking with Fano Montoya-Maya with the Coral Restoration Foundation.
Thank you so much for being here on BBC News. I know you were recently out at these reef sites in Florida where you operate. Just give us a sense. I mean, we've been hearing about these bleaching events. How are things looking right now? What do the reefs look like?
Well, Carl, we were at Horseshoe Reef, which is an iconic reef here in Florida, and we had mixed feelings because our iconic species, the elkhorn coral, on that side were one of the surviving stands, and That one we found it dead, as we did after the mass bleaching event, but we saw a lot of massive corals, the brain, the star corals, is still alive, and large sizes, which, give us hope for the reefs here.
We know that there was this massive bleaching event, the fourth now in recorded history. How did that affect the reefs there in Florida?
Well, for some of the species, these iconic reef-building species like the branching corals, the elk and the starhorn, at some locations, it was like locally extinction. That
Wow.
we know for sure, because we haven't been able to find some of those living stands so far. But for the other non-acroporids or non-branching corals, they're still alive. They recover after the bleaching event. And you see that some corals did better than others. And that just tells us that the reefs are changing and that our work is very important to save some species from regional extinction.
How do you go about doing that? Once these reefs are bleached and the coral is damaged, what do you then do? How do you come in and start to repair the situation?
Well, first, monitoring, right? Looking at the reef and how it behaved, how it ended up after this bleaching event is very important to us to, adopt all those lessons learned and implement it in the work that we do. And with that information, then we identified what species arrangements will do better, next time. And now we are adapting those strategies of propagating and outplanting certain species to mimic what survived the bleaching event and try to bring those species, continue adding those species to the reef. And in the meantime, while we do that, we propagate and continue to rebuild the stock of those species that didn't do that well in our reefs.
Some of these temperatures that we saw in the ocean last summer were striking. Coral survives between 73 and 84 degrees Fahrenheit. The ocean was reaching mid-90s up to 101 degrees Fahrenheit. That's around 38 degrees Celsius. What kinds of corals can survive that? What sorts of methods are you using to try to adapt coral reefs to these kinds of temperatures?
There are some species that are more susceptible to that heat stress, those spikes. But what we're finding now is that some genotypes, in other words, some individuals of all species survive on the reef and survive on our nurseries as well. Of course, the ones that did better are those massive colonies that take too long to grow. And those that are fast-growing species that are highly susceptible, those are the ones that succumb more commonly to these high sea temperatures. So it's a mixed bag here, and we're trying to identify which ones are doing better, which ones are not doing that better, and adapting again those strategies to continue bringing life to these reefs.
Some experts say this may not be a sustainable method, that humans can't continue to replant these coral reefs as they die off during these bleaching events. What do you think? I mean, what does the future say for coral reefs and the way that we continue to maintain them?
Well, I completely understand the concern, but I will argue that if it wasn't for the work that we've been doing for the last 15, 20 years, some of these species may have already died. So we have a role here. Restoration has a role here to avoid some species reaching extinction.
And just briefly, we've seen these temperatures, we've seen some of the damage done to these reefs. What keeps you going? Why do you think it's so important to continue to try to save these coral reefs?
Seeing that there are survivors after the bleaching event, that corals continue to grow, that gives me hope. Seeing that they're still alive and that a lot of people now are paying attention to the stress and the challenge that coral reefs are facing. And I think we're reaching that momentum to see a change in our management effectiveness.
Fanor Montoya Maya, Program Manager with the Coral Restoration Foundation down in Florida. Thank you very much.